Our interview this morning is with Elmo C. Baker. Mo was born January 25th, 1932 at Morehouse, Missouri. He served in the United States Air Force January of 1952 through December of 1978. His highest rank attained was Colonel in 06. This interview is being conducted in Burleson, Texas. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I have no relationship with Mo Baker. Also here during the video work is Milton Gibson. This video is being done for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also for Operation Remember for the city of Burleson, Texas. And with that, Mo, we'll let you tell us your story of your time in the U.S. military, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I was interested in the military from my childhood and had spent 2 years at the University of Missouri, which qualified me to enter the service and get into flying training, which I did, and eventually was commissioned to fly. Now, when I entered the service, the Korean conflict was on, and I had ambition of getting over there and flying those Sabre jets and shooting down MiGs. And by the time I got my commission, the peace accord had been signed, and for the next 10 years, I served in the Air Force as a fighter pilot in Air Defense Command in the beginning, flying the 94C, F-102, and F-106 high-altitude interceptors, stationed for the most of that time at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. The Air Defense Command protects the Washington, D.C. area, and I rose to the rank of captain when I was assigned to, or given the opportunity to go off to engineering school to give myself more qualifications to be effective in the Air Force. I went to the Air Force Institute of Technology in Wright-Patterson, achieved an electronic engineering degree, and then was assigned a combat tour to go to Vietnam in the F-105D, a single-place fighter bomber, and join the 357th TAC Fighter Squadron there, and that's in the 355th TAC Fighter Wing at Takhli, Thailand. And those days we were flying F-105s and regular strikes into North Vietnam, doing interdiction work, bombing bridges, railroad tracks, power plants. Never were against people or armed army. Strictly interdiction work. We were enjoined by our commanders, don't drop bombs on people. That's not our effort. And so the war against the North was fairly clean war as far as the Air Force was go, but there was a great deal of loss of aircraft in that war against North Vietnam. They were armed well by their supporters, the Russians and the Chinese, with 357 rapid-firing anti-aircraft and 57 millimeter rapid-firing anti-aircraft, as well as the surface-to-air missiles. The SA-2 primarily was our biggest threat going into North Vietnam. The squadron I had joined had lost several men 3 months before I arrived, and I was their replacement. And to give you some feel for how many losses we were taking, during the 6 months that I fought before I got shot down, 12 people were rotated, having achieved their 100 mission obligation, but 17 people were shot down. It looks like it's going to be a tough deal trying to get to your 100 missions before you get shot down. And actually, I did get shot down on my 61st mission. That day we were flying against a bridge just north of Hanoi. The force commander was Colonel Robert White of X-15 fame. You might recall that Robert White flew the X-15 out of the atmosphere straight up for 52 miles and received astronaut wings for that achievement. Well, he was serving with that wing as the operations officer, and each time he led the force in for a Vietnam strike, he liked to have me go along as his element leader. He and his wingman are called Shark 1 and 2, and I was Shark 3 with my wingman Shark 4. Following a strike, when you fly with Colonel White, he likes to run up and down Thud Ridge and see if he can catch some MiGs unaware and try to get a shot at them. The F-105 is not really an air-to-air aircraft. It runs very fast. It was designed to run in on a high-speed run-in and toss bombs into maybe Moscow in the Cold War. But as far as turning sharply an air-to-air battle, it wasn't that. But it was extremely fast on the deck. And that was our defense against MiGs. And the North Vietnamese had some MiGs. The MiG-21 as well as the MiG-17. So when we were detected by the MiGs, the F-105s would just light the afterburner and outrun them and sail on back home. And that was our tactic. Had a lot of fun doing that. We never actually saw a MiG and got a shot at one. That day we were going to do the same thing again. After Colonel White and his wingman delivered their what we call frag bombs. It's anti-aircraft suppressor. Great cans of little bomblets that would drop first, 30 seconds before the airstrike, and then I would go in with the rest of the guys behind me, 18 of us, roll in and strike the bridge. And that day, I'm the first one down the chute. I got 2 anti-aircraft shells in the aircraft. It destroyed my flight control system. Barely got this thing out of a dive. They obviously got hit in the hydraulics and punctured a fuel cell that allowed fuel to go down around the engine and catch on fire. So as I pulled off of the target and looked for some clear land to eject, I told the other people behind me, Shark 3 is hit, which is not a real surprise to them because when a Thud catches on fire, and that's our nickname for the F-105 Thunder Chief, when a Thud catches on fire, it looks like a shuttle launch. Great, huge, billowing, burning fuel plume goes out the back. Staggering off to the end, I punched out just before the airplane was shuddering and acting like it wanted to tear itself apart. So I bailed out very fast. I was doing 550 knots, and the speed itself is enough to tear your body apart. We were never designed to run that fast and try to eject, but there was no question how to do it. The fire was trying to get in the cockpit with me. So I bailed out right over a rice paddy. Snapped my left leg, however, in the exit. The left femur was just snapped like a piece of celery. Coming down in the chute, I had the forethought to reach in and get an emergency radio I had on the emergency frequency and told the exiting aircraft, don't send a chopper. I'm too far in, no sense losing a chopper too. I'll see you guys after the war. And Colonel White, to his credit, came back and flew around me in a circle and gave me a good piece of advice. He said, Roger, make friends down there, Mo. And he departed. And it was me against 19 million bad guys from that point on. Descended into the rice paddy. Steered the chute. Those chutes can be steered a little bit. And landed in the mud and rolled towards my good leg and set up open the capstans that spill the chute, let the breeze pull that away, pull my broken leg out in front of me, and by that time, some 15 seconds, I guess, I was captured because the villagers had seen me coming down, descending, and they arrived there with bamboos, sticks, machetes, and one guy with a big rifle. And they were frightened of me, and the air raid was very close to them. I had destroyed the bridge, and so they were very irate. And they proceeded to beat on me and then take off all my clothes, right straight down to only my briefs left on. They wanted me to get up and walk out, but I soon found I couldn't walk out. So everybody got an arm, leg, elbow, whatever they could grab, and took me to a rice hut nearby, where the villagers all took their turn and punching and kicking on me to show their anger. But finally, a medic woman came and ran them out. Gave me some kind of shot right directly into my wounded leg, and I passed out. I expect that was just a shot of morphine, and it was her duty to save the pilot. Ho Chi Minh had interest and probably passed the word around, you can show your anger to your captive, but bring him in. We need him for other reasons. Namely, a prisoner is worth some as a trading pawn. Ho Chi Minh had in ultimately getting some kind of political advantage by trading in the pilots, as well as some military information, if possible. So towards the evening, they came with a little small truck, loaded me in the back end of it, and took me to 4 other villages just to show off their captive. And I took a few more poundings by irate villages, and eventually got to a large field where a helicopter, a Russian helicopter, probably the M19, lifted me out of there and took me to downtown Hanoi, where a crowd had been gathered for my arrival. There might have been 2,000 there, is my guess. A guy with a bullhorn got up and made an inflaming speech to the crowd, and they just got more and more irate, and finally the word was given, take him out, and they all grabbed me and pulled me out into the crowd and started pounding on me and moving me across the tarmac, maybe 300 meters, towards a jeep where the prison officials were there to take possession of me. But this crowd was a mob. It was unruly. It was unpredictable. And it's probably the closest I came to dying in Vietnam. And I was aware of that. The guy that had my left leg, carrying my left leg, found that it was limber and loose, and so he could twist my foot all the way around to where it pointed directly opposite of the other foot, and I would scream. And the crowd liked that. They cheered. So for 200-300 yards, it was twist, scream, cheer. And I managed to survive it, however. And the prison guards took possession of me, took me downtown to Hanoi to the Hoa Lo prison, a prison that was built by the French to imprison Vietnamese when they were colonialists. They were colonialists for 100 years there. It has now been used to house murderers, rapists, and American prisoners. All of these prisoners, Ho Chi Minh called black criminals. Black criminals have a definition, and that is they have no human rights. They're so black in their sins against the society. Excuse me. Therefore, The initial interrogation was equally as brutal as the crowds. They wanted to find out from every new captive what new target in Hanoi. Naturally, they wanted to move those guns that shot me down to wherever the next target was. And it was our duty, and we had been trained to avoid answering that if we knew it, and probably we did not because we were not briefed on tomorrow's targets, only our own. But our objective was to avoid answering anything for 24 hours. And having done that, you would have served your country. And I managed to do that. And because the Vietnamese were not interested in sticking to name, rank, and serial number, which you're authorized to give, and date of birth by the Geneva Conventions, they were going well beyond that, and they moved immediately to application of excruciating pain in their interrogation process, namely kicking on my wounded leg once again and twisting my foot. I would tell them, I don't know, I can't understand you, or English bad, and all these are good secondary stands that we have been trained to make. And occasionally I would faint, pass out. And they would just wait until I awakened and continue on. We did this all night long until daybreak. They took a little break to go to breakfast. Came back and started once again to apply pressure pain. I had no water or any care at all. They didn't care about your discomforts. And sometime during that day, another air raid came. It was another group of 105s, and I could hear the great big engines roaring across the sky and dropping 3,000-pound bombs on a nearby target. And the captors jumped up, ran into their shelters, and left me lying on the floor in the interrogation room, and I finally got a break. And that was simply the standard operating procedure that the Vietnamese went through with every prisoner. I believe we lost quite a few guys in the village. They probably got killed by villagers. I think we probably lost some people in this brutal propaganda effort where they turned it over to a crowd of 2,000. I'm sure I would have died if I'd ever got below their waist and they were able to kick or stomp on me. But those of us who arrived in the prison camp, there might have been some that died in the initial interrogation process. We'll never know. I do know that too was very brutal, and they used other methods besides kicking on wounds. They had some horrible methods. They used excruciating, painful methods of torture, and they went straight to it. They're nothing like the Germans used cleverness and guile to get you to talk about They had no intention to do that. They had no intention to try to appeal to our Vietnamese patriotism. You should be helping us to do. And I didn't do that. None of that. They went straight to the application of excruciating pain. And I think the men that served in that war did a pretty good job of making their way through that without giving away tactical information, like I did. I was glad when that bomb raid came and I'd made it to my 24 hours. After that, the following 3 weeks, they occasionally would take me out of the cell and try to get some information out of me, holding before me the threat that we're not going to repair your leg. If your leg gets gangrene, we throw you away with it. And I think they probably were quite sincere about that. We had 601 prisoners. None of them came home amputees. It's not logical. I think there's probably some people that were just too wounded to repair their limbs were, and and they got wiped out by the enemy. But we'll never know that for sure. At any rate, after 3 weeks of off and on maltreatment and interrogation, they did take me off to Bak Yang Hospital to have a femur pin put in this broken leg. And I was in that hospital for 30 days. This is not a good place to be if you're a prisoner of war, because you're surrounded by bomb victims. And twice I was affronted by people in that hospital that wanted to kill me. They did have a guard who set out the door off and on. And the word was passed around, this is my prisoner, don't do anything to him. But we still had some close calls while I was there. I was removed from that after that 30 days, late at night, by a group from the prison authorities who said there are some progressive American people in town and they want to see an American who has received the humane and lenient treatment of medical treatment for your wound. And I sensed the propaganda effort was coming forth, and the camp commander, we called him the Rat, gave me death threats, said, should I say anything bad about his country while talking to these people? And place into a room suddenly where the cameras came on and the lights came on and the propaganda effort started, and I was face to face with Thomas Hayden and 6 other peaceniks from the USA. Doesn't matter if it was Thomas Hayden, who happens to be a sympathetic aiding and abetting the enemy, in my opinion. It could have been a clergyman or a journalist. It's the worst thing in the world to send somebody in to talk to a prisoner of war, because they ask the wrong questions. The first question they always ask is, are you being treated well? Well, you haven't been treated well. And you can't say that in front of the enemy without bringing your life back on the line. Same way with the second question, are you being fed well? Have you received adequate medical treatment, et cetera, et cetera? And the Vietnamese know this. They have 14 questions that if somebody like Jane Fonda comes to visit, they will go out and beat up prisoners to get them to say positive answers to these 14 standard questions, and then make them see the progressive American visitors. And if after that they say anything derogatory, they take beatings again. So it's just not a good thing to go see prisoners under any circumstances. 3 women for peace came. They wanted to help stop the war. Caused my roommate a bad set of beatings after he sounded off. Military guys boast a little bit about their attacks and their achievements, and that it cost him a lot of pain and anguish. So that started off my regular day-to-day routine life in the prison camps, which followed. And I was in that prison camp 2,031 days. Not that particular camp, I actually moved a couple of times, but it's 5.5 years. It was a war every day in that prison camp. The Vietnamese wanted to use you as a propaganda source. They wanted us to condemn the administration. We know it's not your fault. You're a soldier, you follow orders, but your commander-in-chief, LBJ, they wanted us to say derogatory things about him. Whether we liked LBJ or not, we knew enough to know that our job as a military guy was not to badmouth the administration in any way, and we did that. And we stood there nose to nose with the enemy, unarmed, for 2,031 days, and did that. And you might recognize when, if you were old enough to be there when we were all released, coming home, saluting the flag, that I think these 601 guys did a pretty good job with their resistance. For the one, on the one hand, we were all college graduates, and their interrogators had a education at the 8th grade level. They were not clever. All they did was come in and read a propaganda blurb that they wanted you to hear, or such as the atrocities against the barbarous bombing of South Vietnam. Then they wanted you to write that down. After they finished an hour and a half reading, the next hour and a half they wanted you to play it back to them. Well, that's the way they do their own training. They train their young men on the clear-eyed leadership of Ho Chi Minh in a session, and the next session is you write down all that you heard. Good enough for them, but the GIs, we were forgetful. We couldn't remember a thing we heard the first hour and a half. I used all sorts of techniques to get them off the track. We could usually get them off the track on not in an argumentative way. You didn't want to get yourself back in the ropes or in the manacles, but get them talking about something else. And the next thing you know, you've got them off on the track, and their hour and a half is gone. A lot of guys were really good at just visually getting them off the track. I remember one guy that said that he had found that he could start gradually leaning in his chair until he got just so far over the interrogator was reading his book, trying to get to him, and it distracted him, and he'd get back up, sit back up. Another guy would stalk flies and things in the room and get him distracted. I, from time to time, would get them talking about another subject. They would, well, I remember one time they were trying to get me to listen to their propaganda on the woman's role in the People's Republic. And I said, yeah, I need to know that. I said, no, you don't. You don't need to meet people. I said, well, I don't mean me, but I need to know how boy meets girl here in Vietnam. Who, me? I said, yeah, how do you meet a girl in Vietnam? They said, oh. I said, how do you meet that girl? I saw a militia woman passing just right in front of the window. He said, oh, I mustn't meet her. She's the camp commander's girlfriend. I said, no, just any girl. Maybe I send her a note. And then I said, that's really good because I used that in grammar school. What do you say on the note? Do you love me? Say yes, say no. Check yes, check no. No, he says, I don't say that. I say, would you like to take the tea and cookies with me Sunday afternoon? The guards got off Sunday afternoon. They only make 6 Hao 5 Sue, which is roughly 65 cents, spending money per week, and that's enough to buy tea and cookies for 2. And so she was being invited to share his allowance. I said, that's really cool. You probably go down to the lake and sit on the bench and watch the swans go by? He said, yes, I think so. I said, then you put your arm around her? Oh. He didn't like the way that was going. He said, I don't think so. And I said, well, second day, you spring for tea and cookies, you put your arm around her? He says, well, maybe. Good. Third day, you spring for tea and cookies, do you squeeze her bosom? He said, oh no, that's very bad behavior. And then I said, yeah, it's the same in my country. My mother see me do it, she slapped my face. He said, your mother very smart. I said, well, we do it anyway, don't you? And he said, yeah, we do. And on we went until we talked up. We talked the whole 3 hours up and about boy meets girl, and so we didn't have that problem. We could get even the officers off. on telling them, hey, you speak real good English. If you were an interpreter in the UN, you'd make $800 a month. And they'd say, that's a lot of money? I said, oh yeah. Let me tell you what you get for $800 a month. You don't have to borrow a bicycle to come here. Today you can have a bicycle. Everybody in your family can have a bicycle. Is that so? I said, yeah. And then next thing I know, I'm running him down the shopping list of what you can get for $800. And he never got around to his propaganda piece. As a matter of fact, the next time he came in the camp, he wanted to know what else I can get for my $800. It's an easy thing to get them off. They never succeeded in their weekly mind-bending propaganda with the Americans. The worst part about it was occasionally the high officer would want a confession of your sins, and appeal to Ho Chi Minh for forgiveness. It was kind of in the book. And so occasionally they would try to really put some hard pressure on you and some pain if necessary. And one 10-day session, they had taken away all my clothes, and it was happened to be in January, and it was down to around 50, 55 degrees in the evening. And kept me, it's called cold soaking. He cold soaked me for 10 days, trying to get me to make a confession to Ho Chi Minh and about how many bombing raids I had and how many Vietnamese people I'd killed and how sorry I was. Then I wouldn't do that. He was defeated in that because I warmed up. They tried to keep me awake every night, and they can't do that either because the guard, or one walk-around guard, they could afford to do that. He had to go walk around and peep into everybody's cell at least once every hour, so I got about a 20-minute nap out of every hour. In 10 days, he realized I could do this for a long time. They gave up on that. But that was their effort. Propagandize us all the time we were there. Food-wise, we were not treated very well either. We got 2 bowls of soup a day. I think the dietitians estimated we got 800 calories. 2 bowls of watery soup and a crust of bread about the size of a small dinner roll. It's not quite bread and water, but it is almost bread and water. Oddly enough, they never took it away from us when we were in solitary confinement because it's not a large step to go from soup and water to bread and water. Even when I was in solitary confinement, in that 10 days that they were cold soaking, I still got my 2 bowls of soup a day. But we got very thin. We lost a lot of weight. And the guys that had been there 2.5 years more than I had really were gaunt when they were returned. We never got good health treatment either. They really didn't know how to treat a pink eye epidemic. We had pink eye passed around by the guards somehow. I mean, suddenly we were all getting pink eye, and they had no idea what to do about that. This we used is just hot water compacts laid down for 3 days, and we were blind. But this is a very virile pink eye, worse than anything that we've ever seen in the States. Surviving that. Same way with a bad cold or the flu, the guards would be the source of it, and they didn't know much to do about it. So our medical treatment was not much better than a tenderfoot Boy Scout. That went along all right. We didn't want them coming in and giving us vitamin shots because they didn't know how to do it. They came in with one of those old-timey kind of hypodermic needles that had the removable, unscrew. It looks like a bicycle pump thing. Put it in warm water, which incubates everything that last guy had, and put it back on and try to give you a vitamin shot. We wouldn't take them. I said, no thanks, I'm feeling fine. I don't need that. And I let the camp medic go on his way. They really didn't try to do much for us that was not other than life-sustaining. With one odd, very odd thing, they gave us 3 cigarettes a day. It's a way of life smoking over there. Little 6-year-old kids are smoking. And I think it was after the 3rd day that they moved in, Kerrigan, my cellmate, for 3.5 years, to take care of me because I had a broken leg. He was not wounded. They stuck in 6 cigarettes in a punk stick. Kerrigan was a chain smoker. He loved that. Grabbed those cigarettes and started smoking them. I wasn't a smoker. It didn't matter to me. But it's odd that they thought that would be something that they're doing for the humane and lenient treatment. And it was something that if for some misdemeanor they could take away from you. They really didn't have that lever over me, so but I pretended I was participating in smoking, so Kerrigan could have 2 cigarettes 3 times a day. It was like 10 minutes the war was over. Guard go around, give everybody the cigarettes, light them up, and then he'd go sit under a tree and smoke. Because the war was off for about 10 minutes. But after that, we're right back to the hostilities. That's an odd thing. For the most part, we see very little in the way of nourishment and medical treatment. Moved around quite a bit. For some reason, we have no real good reason to move people in between camps, but it was a good way for us to transfer information from camp to camp. From room to room, however, we had developed a TAP code. The TAP code was used in the previous war, taught to us in a survival school and brought in by one of the earliest shoot-downs called Carlisle Smith. Smitty brought in, he was a conscientious guy, and he practiced tapping a little bit before he even got to become a prisoner. But so it turned out the code is so simple. It's a 5-by-5 array of letters, omitting K, because K you can substitute a C for the K. And you just tap row and column. For instance, B, this Baker is tap, tap, tap. And in nothing flat, you can learn to tap the tap code. And every new guy that arrives, our effort is to get to him, teach him the tap code. And the call up is shave and haircut sound, shave and a haircut. 2 bits is the answer, and you get busy tapping the wall. Stick your ear to the wall while he's tapping, and carry on a conversation that way. We did that all the way through the war. They were never able to stop it. They would give you a lot of grief when they caught you doing it. In the first year, I think I was caught several times. The camp commander called me in and said, "We know you're a communication expert." And I said, "Oh, I don't think so." "Oh, yes." He said, "Look." He pointed at a callus I had on my it was a real callus from knocking on those stone walls and heavy doors. And I said, "Oh, no, that's just, I got that in school when I'm writing my pencil. That's the way I hold my face." "No, you tap the wall." And so I think he took away my cigarettes for a month and made me stay 2 nights in the outside sheds, maybe letting the mosquitoes eat on me. No more than that. I didn't get beat up because it happened to be that it was in a time when hostilities towards the prisoners was not active. When that happened, when Ho Chi Minh died. He died in September 1969. The day after he died, the prison administrators began to have less pressure on them to be hostile towards the Americans. And they gradually eased up on letting guards arbitrarily beat on you. And from then on, it was kind of live and let live. You don't punch out a guard and you won't get hurt too badly. And our last few months, I was in a camp near China. They figured the B-52 bombing might wipe out all their trading ponds, so they took half of us up to a camp called Kaobang near China. And we set it out up there, and we got the feeling, because we were allowed to get out and wander around in the courtyard as a group and meet another room full of prisoners. And I said, this is the way it should have been from the beginning, and I think when we leave and go back down to Hanoi, the war will be over. And so it was. Transported back down to Hanoi and staged out of there, and they returned us in 3 different time groups. This is after Henry Kissinger and Lee Duk-to met secretly, agreed to a ceasefire, American withdrawal, and exchange of prisoners. We didn't like that from a fighter's standpoint. We wanted a definitive victory, and we didn't see that. So unfortunately, the Vietnamese effort was not heroic. It was not supported by the people. They got very tired of having a Vietnam War be conducted. And so when these GIs came back, it was not ticker tape parade. It wasn't Johnny come marching home as, oh, you poor devil, come on in, and sorry you had to go. Nevertheless, that's what GIs do. So we came back saluting the flag and got back into the business of flying. I got an opportunity immediately when I got back to go fly a T-38 down at Randolph Air Force Base, just to prove to myself I'm still a stick man. And that was a good idea by Three-Finger Jack Ryan, who was a TAC general at the time. So get those boys back in the air, they're pilots. And that was cathartic. It was really wonderful. Most of us got back to find we have big family problems because of the 6 years, 7.5 year absence. It's tough on marriages. Some of us found ourselves single. And I remarried. I married a MIA wife whose guy got killed, but she waited to see if he is going to be among the walking. And we met down in Austin, where Governor Dolph Briscoe was honoring the Texas returnees and invited all the MIA wives. And we merged our family and lived happily ever after. We're living now. I had finished up my career as a colonel in Systems Command Headquarters, flying a desk, but that was the nature of getting promotion. You know, when you get promoted to colonel, you got to get promoted out of the cockpit. But following that duty, I retired and came to Texas. We brought our family to Texas, raised them here, and we have lived happily ever after. Nearly 30 years of duty with the Air Force. 6 of them weren't that good, but it's a marvelous career. And I think the guys I served with in Vietnam, they served the country well. Proud of that group. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Just a few questions here, Mo. When you were in the hospital, guard outside the door, were you in what we would consider a private or a semi-private room? Or were you in a bay?
I was in a short hallway that had a door on one end and French doors on the other end. They had papered over the French doors and tied a rope around the 2 handles of the French doors and put a metal cot in there for me. It was really not a room. It was a connecting hallway that they commandeered. And I stayed in there for 30 days. At one time, a militia woman came through the French doors, sawed through the rope, and threatened me with her bayonet. but then stood aside as the surgeon who had operated on my leg walked past and said, "We broke the key off there, and I had to ask the militia woman to help me get in." I thought I was fairly startled, because she was the same militia woman who shook that knife at me as I was being brought into that hospital at 2 a.m. and a couple of weeks earlier.
Your interrogators, 8th grade education, basically, that level.
There were a couple that were really sharp. One guy was educated in the States, knew idiomatic English. You couldn't put double entendres on him. He knew what you were talking about. And he spoke it very clear, and he was a primary investigator. The camp commander spoke French, of course. He was there when the French were there. Very little English. So we prepped up on French, and if we had to ask the camp commander for something like hot water to wash our dishes in because we're getting dysentery, we'd do that in French. But as far as the day-to-day propaganda kids, they were just guards that had learned how to read English. They may not even understand the words that we're reading, but they could do that. But they were real easy to divert, so their propaganda efforts, they didn't have enough officers to go around with and really attempt an intellectual conversation about socialism versus the free enterprise. It was way over their head.
You have a garment with you, Mo.
Oh, I do. This is the uniform I wore. It doesn't look like an Air Force uniform, but it is. It's one I wore for 2,031 days in North Vietnam. Whether you're wearing this or not, you still got your country's honor to maintain. And I think the guys that put this on, I brought this one back underneath my go-home clothes that they issued the day I left. Just remind me that you might be a prisoner of war.
No oak leaf clusters or no eagles on there.
No, but that's what we wore during our time there.
One last question I have here, Mo. Have you ever been back? I know a lot of...
I haven't felt the need to go back, but some of the guys have. They wanted to go see the villagers that captured them, or they wanted to go see the spot where their airplane impacted on the side of the hill, and that doesn't really appeal to me. I'm nothing against the Vietnamese people. I certainly don't like their politics and the brutality with which they treated the Americans, but I have nothing to... I don't feel a need for closure, so that's not my vacation spot. Some guys have. McCain's been there 7 times, but he goes over there to jack them up about what they did. It's not a vacation for him.
Well, it's just fascinating, really. Wow. We really owe you, the whole country owes you just, I'm not sure you can say how much we owe you and fellows like yourselves, so. Great interview, and we certainly appreciate your time this morning and everything that you've done for the country, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.